what I see when I speak to almost every company is pockets doing fantastic work or pockets of excellence, I would call it, but that's not consistent throughout the company. Some of our clients are well above the rest and like a higher level of doing this, but many others aren't. And I think it's not because of negligence, it's just time. There's also an element that Bluebeam is seen as so simple that, we don't need to set up a procedure for it. It's just a markup tool, and I get that. But the ones that go, oh, hold on, there's a process I can put into this. I can actually extract data out of this. I can pull it out. They're the ones getting a lot of advantage from this just very simple red line markup. And tying back to what I said at the very start there, in like it becoming an entire process, I often focus with clients like, let's nail this. Let's get this as an office standard, because inside that, there's so many different functions within Bluebeam, it ties into it. So to one example at a client, and I said, look, let's not worry about all the cool stuff you can do with Bluebeam. Nail this down, because this is the base level which you need to build upon. You get this right, the other stuff will be easier. So, the foundations, the education about the red line markup process can be implemented into more complex tasks.
Hi, just a quick one. If you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. It really helps us share practical knowledge with more people. And if you want deeper insights, you can also subscribe to our newsletter at digitalconstructionpodcast.com. All right, let's jump in. Hi, Shanoc. Welcome to the Digital Construction Podcast.
Andrea, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Today, we have Shanoc Halliday, Senior Enterprise Customer Success Manager at Bluebeam. We will talk about his early days in drafting to working with global leaders across the industry. And in his role, Shanoc has the opportunity to see how digital solutions are implemented across different companies and different teams. I'm very excited for this episode, but before we start, Shanoc, I would like to ask you, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received in your career?
There's definitely one standout advice that was given to me. I was a ambitious CAD manager at Arcadis. Maybe could have been Hyder back then. And a senior engineer said to me, Shan, you should really do more public speaking. It just creates more opportunity. And like anyone else, that freaked me out. And, anxiety about public speaking is a concern, but I lent into it. So what started from myself inside Revit, just doing lunch and learns with the engineers at Arcadis to present them of, what to understand about Revit and what the changes are from traditional AutoCAD and what to look out for, what's a drafty mistake, what's a software issue, to then going into presenting it built or RTC, and then opportunities. Like for me, I presented in Vietnam, in Japan, been to the US several times, been invited over there to present, and of course, podcasts like this. So it's interesting. It's something different, and look, I suggest to anyone, like public speaking, it's still makes me very nervous. Don't get me wrong. It's really bizarre sometimes when people afterwards say, "Oh, you seem so confident. You're so good." Like that wasn't me inside. But just have a go at it. It's really good.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. I'm doing this in my second language, but that's a great opportunity for us to talk about this today. That's great. And so, Shanoc, like you have transitioned from, you mentioned you worked at Arcadis, then you worked also at Robert Baird before.
Yes.
For those who may not be that familiar, can you explain what the role of Senior Enterprise Customer Success Manager at Bluebeam entails?
That's actually a good question. And I think the expression good question gets said too often, but it is because I often find myself having to explain it. So a customer success manager ultimately is really just trying to build the success of the client. So, okay, let's talk about from a business case point of view. What we're trying to do from a subscription model, right, is we want people to renew every year. So where I'm focused on the technology, essentially, we want people to stay with us because it's really easy for them to drop off and not renew. So if you want to think about from a mathematical or from a business point of view, if we have, say, 10% of our clients drop off because they just understand the value of our software and they're like, well, maybe I'll just do it in something else, another competitor. Where in fact, had they known about what our software can do, they might stay with us. Well, that 10%, if we ever want to increase our business by 10%, we have to then find 20% of business because you have to overcome what we've lost. So I can get the detail, of course, or I won't for now, but there's always a drop off or churn rate. But my job is essentially reduce that churn. From a more interesting point of view, like that's the business case where I don't get into too much. I don't get involved in selling of licenses, but a more interesting part that we do from customer success. There's a whole range, and depending on the different types of CSMs we have within Bluebeam and CSMs in different software companies, right? But for myself in a global enterprise, the best solutions is when we have a customer discovery workshop. So we sit down with the business and say, what is your business trying to achieve? What's it like at a very high level? What's it like at a manager level and a project deliverable level? And we understand what those challenges are, the opportunities as well, and the blockers. And from there, we end up building a customer success plan with them to say, right, in the next 12 months, you want to, maybe it might be increase the amount of tenders that we can do. Well, how can we do this more simply? Maybe it's about the collaboration and how we want to do this better. And maybe it might be with this new AI and everything that coming about that. How can we leverage AI? So we're not really trying to solve, what buttons to press in Bluebeam. It's really about what's the business trying to do to be successful and how we can support that. So that's tying those two things together. I'm there for the client success, which ultimately I work for Bluebeam. I'm there for their success as well.
So maybe a simple way to express that is that you want to make sure that your customer successfully implements the digital solution you are providing. Is that a fair way to express that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you're passionate about this job, and we mentioned like before we started recording that you also want to start a newsletter to educate the industry about your role. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, maybe jokingly, I think it started off when I picked up my son from a party and he was saying he doesn't even know what I do for a job anyway. I just sit in my office, in my home studio, and just talk to clients all day. Well, I like to think I do a bit more than that. So, yeah, there's a newsletter I'm going to bring out this month, and the intention there is demystifying what a CSM actually does. And the intent will be to speak to other CSMs about what they do with their clients. And I've also spoken to some clients about understanding how they get the best out of CSMs. Like I've got one client, or Stephen Core that you had on here before. I've got a great relationship with Stephen because he understands how I can actually help his business case as well. So look, we are all here for business, but there's also a lot of in between about just general enjoyment in the job, productivity of, we all want to just get home. So how can we do that easier and simpler? So I'm really looking forward to having Steve on because he'll talk about how he uses CSMs to his advantage for his own staff. And I think that's also important.
Yeah, when it's ready, when it's live, let me know because I'll certainly subscribe to your newsletter. It's exciting.
Yes.
And you've been very hands-on in CAD and BIM in the past, so you are somebody that come from the battlefield, and you made this transition. So can you share with us how do you make this transition from that space where you were working hands-on to now guiding other companies to achieve their digital success?
So I was thinking about this beforehand, and I think it's a characteristic of the way I tend to work. I never really want a massive career change, but I always love the evolution of things. And this is very predominant, even with like drafting standards that I do. I think like any procedure needs to be able to evolve. So what I mean by that is where I got to this. I'm working at Robert Berg Group in the Melbourne office, where a lot of support from the Brisbane office to really implement BIM into that practice. And then myself and a few others, when we got, more confident using Revit, and back then in 2009, there was a key word was workaround, and understanding what those workarounds were to get the software to really function correctly. Then you want to impart that knowledge onto other people and get them confident to deliver their projects. Then moving into Arcadis, that was an interesting change because we've got a dedicated resource center. So therefore, it was about educating the resource center of like, well, don't just draft or model, but how can we make this better? How can we have those office standards and really push them through? And that gave me a really strong appreciation where English is a second language. So that then migrated into myself working for a BIM consulting company. So it was at A2K, and that was moved into the opportunity because I've been working with in the Philippines to work then in Thailand, in India, and also in Dubai. Again, training up people as English as a second language, how to use complex software like Navisworks and Revit, and then ultimately into Bluebeam as well. So that Bluebeam part evolved into focusing on Bluebeam. And then I got to present for, like I said at the very start, I got to present once or twice in the US at the Bluebeam conference back then, XCon. And so I got to know a lot of people at Bluebeam. And through a blog I was doing and other bits and pieces, got to know more and more people. And then I got offered the opportunity to work at Bluebeam. So yeah, that's how that all came about. But I feel it's been an evolution, and what I love about what I'm doing is I still get to talk back to those BIM people and those challenges. I'm not solving BIM problems, but it's in the BIM sphere, it's in the project deliverables, and understanding software, I guess, is probably the main part, and the nuances and challenges of each software that is still applicable to one another.
Yeah, and I always find interesting to see how different people land into different roles, but they all contribute to the digital transformation of the industry. And yeah, I think your specific role is something that people don't talk about it much often. So it's also good that you are launching your newsletter. So you describe this transition and all of the steps. I'm sure there have been challenges in this journey, but
Yes.
Can you share anything with us? It's been difficult.
I found it a challenge. I was offered an opportunity before I started at Bluebeam, and that was a technical sales engineer. So that role is really about demonstrating the product to potential buyers of the software. It wasn't a CSM role then. And the other role I was offered was a BIM coordinator. So in one sense, it looked like a path, a fork in the path. I could go down a BIM role, or I could go down a sales company or software role. But it did concern me because I put so many years, well over a decade, into BIM, and am I leaving this behind? It took me a while to really process this. And in the end, I would say my decision wasn't about leaving BIM. It was still always about data. So within Bluebeam, there's a lot of data. And if anyone's seen me present, I preach on about it. But that's where I get to focus on how the software, I'm not just doing a markup, it's the data inside that. So that gave me the confidence I'm choosing the right decision moving forward. And look, it's really interesting working for the software side. So I must admit, I really enjoy talking to the product team and making suggestions, and some of them are out there that people are using today, and some of them are contributions that myself and other CSMs have added to the software. And sure, there's also some ideas that product think, no, that's terrible, we're not going to implement that. That's fine.
Yeah, product managers can be tough sometimes. They have different agenda sometimes.
Well, not all my ideas are great ideas. I'd be open to that.
That's a very interesting point of view. You working at Bluebeam are in a very interesting position because you can see different clients and how they work on different workflows and different challenges. But speaking with all of this wide range of companies across the industry, what are the most common workflow challenges that you see today?
So a big part of what I do is I see a lot of people get caught up in like what individual buttons you can press. And look, this goes across all software. I think Navisworks is a really good example of this. It's really multiple buttons comes together to make a process or a workflow, and that's what makes it really robust. Bluebeam is the same. I see a lot of stuff about tips and tricks, and they're really good, but add those tips and tricks together, you've got a powerful workflow. So to your point or your question, the fundamental thing I see across the board is quite simply just the red line markup. I oftentimes talking to this about clients. So if anyone's not too sure, it'll be the internal QA/QC. You know, a red pen means this needs to change. A blue might be a comment about it, and they might go through different highlighters back in the day with pen and paper to go through this process. It's not to say people aren't doing it. Everyone is doing it in some format. I'm talking about consistency in what they're doing and leveraging the most out of the software. What I see when I speak to almost every company is pockets doing fantastic work, or pockets of excellence, I would call it, but that's not consistent throughout the company. Some of our clients are well above the rest and like a higher level of doing this, but many others aren't. And I think it's not because of negligence, it's just time. There's also an element that Bluebeam is seen as so simple that, you know, we don't need to set up a procedure for it. It's just a markup tool, and I get that. But the ones that go, oh, hold on, there's a process I can put into this. I can actually extract data out of this. I can pull it out. They're the ones getting a lot of advantage from this just very simple red line markup. And tying back to what I said at the very start there, and like it becoming an entire process, I often focus with clients like, let's nail this. Let's get this as an office standard, because inside that, there's so many different functions within Bluebeam, it ties into it. So to one example at a client, and I said, look, let's not worry about all the cool stuff you can do with Bluebeam. Nail this down, because this is the base level which you need to build upon. You get this right, the other stuff will be easier. So, you know, the foundations, the education about the red line markup process can be implemented into more complex tasks.
And you just touched on a very important point. You try to guide your clients understand what needs to be prioritized, because I think often there are so many problems that needs to be solved, and part of the challenge is to understand which one do I try to tackle first. So how do you help your clients identify and prioritize the improvements in the digital workflow?
For the most part, the clients that I'm working with, I mean, that's what we go. In all fairness to Bluebeam, and the range of clients we have, you know, we'll have the SMBs, so the small and medium-sized businesses. There might be 1 or 5, maybe even 15 people. Their priorities are different. And I might even go to an example of that one. Then you got your sort of mid-level market, and then into enterprise and global. So in the enterprise global market, what I see is really about collaboration. They're the ones on the joint ventures or alliances. They're the ones that are forced to have communication with other stakeholders. So for them, an example was, I'm really quite proud of the work that's come out of the T2D project in Adelaide. From a process point of view, there's a lot of stakeholders involved in that. It's really easy then to lose information, but the team have done really well to pull that information. I would say they pretty much had the process down pat. I came in with my experience and able to, I don't want to say finesse, but just sort of add elements of value. And everything I suggest, by the way, it's on the clients. So, I mean, they can choose to take my advice, or that might go against, maybe they got another software that might do something similar, or where they might be holding information. But essentially, that's a good example on that project of just fine-tuning the process, so the collaboration space, and that's where, you know, most of my clients are in. I guess on another example, years ago, I was on when I was at TSE doing demonstrations and some training. I enjoyed that too, because there was a client that was doing fire retardant. So their job was basically measure up the entire structural drawings to see how much fire retardant was required on a building, and then get the total tonnage, or the amount of bags and people hours required to do the job, price it, and then send it out to site. So their priority was really just to do a pricing, but we end up speaking to them, and within Bluebeam, we'll have to do an end-to-end solution from tender to handover of keeping that data inside it. So I guess somewhere inside this, it really depends on the client, what they're really trying to tackle, and just listening. I guess that's a big part of the job, just listening.
Yeah, definitely. And many people are familiar with Bluebeam. It's a very, very famous product and many people use it. And it's really, from my point of view, it's a very special product because it operates with PDF files in a world where we are always talking about 3D models, digital twins. So it feels like a little bit contradictory, right? But it still, Bluebeam is a key tool for engineers and BIM team. So can you share with me and with the audience what makes Bluebeam a standout tool for collaboration and project delivery still today?
Yes. So I'm smiling because part of myself public speaking, I joined the Revit user group, Revit. And I remember there being with one of my friends in another engineering company thinking, BIM is here, PDF is dead, it's going to die. And years later, that same person and I started off the Melbourne Bluebeam user group. So we were there like 8 years later or something like that, saying like PDF is here, how can we leverage it better? So it really ties into, well, I should say, it ties into the fact that we don't have that BIM mandate as here as such. But even then in Singapore, we're still heavily relied upon. It's ultimately about the communication. And I mean, there's a lot of things going into it. Bluebeam is so easy to use, it's well loved, but it's also a really nice hybrid between a powerful PDF software and CAD software. I'm not going to pretend that we've got full and complete CAD functionality. On the weekend, I did a takeoff for a friend, and honestly, I found some elements a bit frustrating compared to CAD. But from a takeoff functionality, it was brilliant. It was really easy. So I can see that really easy to adopt. I think engineers like it because they might not have access to CAD software. And I've trained up people using Revit. It's not easy. It's not simple. Bluebeam is rather simple. So, and a proper library's been set up. It's even faster again. So why is it still relevant? I think it's just the simplicity of the communication that really offers, and the fact that just the access to CAD-like functionality that we can communicate easier.
Yeah, definitely. And probably sometimes there are projects that needs to be delivered quickly, and sometimes a Bluebeam is good enough for that specific project.
Well, I think on that, you might come into it in another question, but that's where the diversity of it. I've had engineer or procurement push back and say we don't need Bluebeam to be a CAD software, and we're not going to angle for that. The level of functionality is not there. But yes, engineers answering RFIs or even architects answering RFIs. If you're not being paid to do an as-built, so therefore you don't need to update your Revit model to show what that connection's required. If that can just be something that's just marked up, put into AConnect or something like that and initiate to a client, just have one engineer doing that markup and sending it out. It's much cleaner, it's much more efficient.
Yeah, and you mentioned one of the good things about Bluebeam is that it's very simple. And as a Bluebeam user for a long time, I can tell you that I agree, it's very simple, but it can also achieve a lot. Like there is a lot you can do with Bluebeam. So usually, like people that are using a product, a digital product, sometimes they think, how can I best leverage what Bluebeam to deliver projects more effectively? Like what type of advice would you give to engineers, architects, and BIM technicians that want to leverage Bluebeam more effectively?
The key is, as much as I just said, we're not a CAD software, it's about setting it up like a CAD software. So working with clients that have built out an extensive structural library or mechanical library or P&ID, that has worked really, really well. Another thing is to lean into the fact that the PDF is a container of information or the digital information. So I think it's a double-edged sword in the sense that Bluebeam is so easy to use. And I remember Don Jacobs, who won the Pioneers of Bluebeam back in the day, to kick this off. He said, it's simple by design. We want it to be easy to use. I guess the irony is then we get IT that just deployed to everyone says, oh, this is a simple software. You'd be right. It's just a PDF software. The reality is it's more complex than that, but it's not as hard as BIM. So when I talk to these BIM companies, like it's not the same effort just apply some of that, a quarter of that into Bluebeam, and you'll get a lot of, great resolve or great productivity out of it.
And you touched previously that you mentioned that Bluebeam is using RFIs, which kind of like suggests that you should be using Bluebeam at the end of the projects, but sometimes I know that people use it for early day sketches. So at what stage of the project you think Bluebeam should be introduced to maximize its value?
That's been interesting to watch. So back when I was drafting and modeling up, it was all about, hey, show how clever we are and do a model and model everything, even for concept designs. Where I'm seeing companies now that have this, BIM approach and strong BIM skill set, they're now approaching me and saying, well, how can we do a constructability or concept designs? How can we do this within Bluebeam? Because the reality of the fact that the engineer can do the markup or whoever's working on the project, it might be for a tender, it might be some sort of cross-reference guide, but they can just do that themselves and deliver that project. And if they win that project, they've got this fantastic markup that can then go to the modeling staff. So what I'm seeing is Bluebeam on that starting package as well for all the preliminary designs. I see it through the design as far as the checking and the QA throughout before they issue for construction. I also see Bluebeam, it was a great example of an as-built. So working on a joint venture for the level crossing removals in Melbourne, and they had to verify all the as-builts were correct, and then they'll go to the builder to quantify or check, and then be approval of payments. So we went through a process of doing the as-builts. So in that sense, I see an end-to-end solution. I don't personally see as much going into operations, but I know we've got some clients that are using that side of it as well.
And is there ever a point where, from your point of view, it makes sense to move from Bluebeam to then use another platform? You mentioned like Revit and AutoCAD, but at which point you say, okay, now enough with Bluebeam, let's jump onto another platform. Maybe we reserve Bluebeam for something else later.
Yeah, I thought about this question. I'm worried this might sound like a business easy way out, but choose the right tool for the job. And I don't have a problem having a conversation with the client that will talk about, oh, we're doing this and it's Revisto. I used to use Revisto. I think it's a really powerful tool. There is definitely an overlap. So people that more technically understand how Revisto and Bluebeam will see, yes, there's an element of overlap between those two softwares, but there's also different strengths. So I think more often what really happens is, I mean, even say with ACC or Forma now, there's an element of a markups within Forma. So there's an overlap there. So where would you transition? I don't think there is so much. Just choose the right tool for the right job at the right time. It'd be great. And I've had clients say, can we just get the one tool that does this? Well, I mean, Procore is an amazing tool, but Procore still has integrations into Bluebeam and to possibly other software as well. The reality is no one tool is going to give you the job you want. Have a look at the skill set you've got and what you can leverage and the outcome you're trying to achieve. We're lucky that we can get used across a whole range of things, but sure, if you're going to lean heavily into the BIM side and the model coordination, it might be in Navisworks and Revisto. Fine, that's not going to be us.
Yeah, definitely. You're right. The right tool for a job makes sense. And also, I think it depends on the skill of the specific person that is interacting with that product, because maybe you are not that familiar with Revit and you can do a lot with Bluebeam, or vice versa. Sometimes you're not familiar with Bluebeam and you can do a lot with Revit, hypothetically. And
agree.
And when we think about digital transformation, one of the key aspects is driving adoption. And when we think about adoption, human factor is a big point, right? So how do we make sure that we support the companies and drive digital adoption? But from your point of view, like when you think about a company, sometimes I think about the company culture, because in some companies, maybe the people are supported when they try to implement and adopt digital solutions. What do you think is the role of the company culture in trying to boost the adoption of digital tools?
Digital tools is interesting because I guess we're talking then about new software as well. That is a tricky one because I'm also well aware that procurement trying to reduce their software stacks. And there's when they're doing renewals and purchasing new software and where it gets allocated to and staying compliant, it's a lot of work. So that's a tricky one to answer and might be unique to the individual company. I will say from a digital transformation and where things are going, I mean, AI is kind of putting a big neon sign above everything. It's interesting watching the landscape. Think about digitizing even further with AI. But let me go back a moment. I'm going to lean into my CAD manager role. Office consistency or standardization is the key here. I think once, and I used to say this a lot when I was training up people in Revit, I had a meeting once between some different drafting managers in the Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne office, and we were debating over what roof purlins should look like in plan. And all of us had different ideas of how they should look, and we're quite passionate about it as well. And somewhere inside there thinking, well, if we don't, present it this way, then surely the builders can't build it. The reality is builders see lots of different types of drawings and they still manage to build it. My main thing came up with about how does our resource center, they need a consistent way of we present it. This is our way or this company does it. So I said in the meeting, I don't care if we do it the way I like the least, as long as we consistently do it the way I like the least, because that creates the opportunity for improvement. And that's what I've always had as a philosophy. So even if I've done a Revit template and family content, or in Bluebeam now, profiles and tool sets, my hope is that that gets deployed amongst the staff, and then in 6 to 8 months' time, or even a year's time, it's evolved into something else. So I think that consistency and then the opportunity to improve. So an example as well, if it helps, I'm working with a client that's really keen to push that office standardization, but I don't want to limit that where that no one can change anything. So in Bluebeam, there'll be tool sets. So I want to give the opportunity that staff can create their own tool sets. Like, that's brilliant. You built a brand new steel connection. We could use that. Next week, that gets deployed and everyone gets to use it. So you see an evolution. I think that's from a base level within software, something that needs to be supported. And that's probably a really good culture. That's where I would support.
Definitely. And again, you speak with many digital leaders, and you probably have developed your opinion of what a good digital leader is. But what does good, this is probably a broad question, but what does good digital leadership look like from your perspective?
Digital. I think one that's really just listening to, well, I don't know. I don't have a really good answer for this. It's really challenging. I think, as I said, with AI, that's been forced through, like, the terminology of a digital engineering or digital innovation team. I've seen that word come up a lot more with our clients. There's a lot more listening of what they can do with the software. The challenges that we were facing back in 2010 with trying to do BIM adoption and trying to do like a grassroots up to management to say you should be using this software, they aren't there anymore. We've got management pushing back down saying, what can we do with this? How can we be more lean with staff, or how long we spend on a project? I'm not exactly sure if I have a good answer for that one at this point.
It's difficult because there are different aspects, right? So yeah, totally fine. So let's focus on something a little bit more complex, which is about predicting the future. It's even harder, right?
Yeah, sure.
Of course, nobody can really predict the future, but you probably see trends that are shaping the future of digital collaboration. And is there anything that it's exciting for you? Anything that you surprise you in terms of new trends that are coming to the digital space of construction?
It's really, you can't go anywhere without saying AI. I've already mentioned it here. So I'll put that back into focus within Bluebeam itself. I think that's going to be exciting for us at Bluebeam because, look, there's AI from a computer image recognition. That's pretty simple, but getting beyond that, AI wants to look at data. And I've been, on my bandwagon about talking to people about the information within the PDF, how you can store data and how you can extract that data and utilize it elsewhere. And some really good success stories with that with clients as well. So I was on a call with a client the other day. They were kind of curious, what can this AI do? It's like, well, let's just focus on how you're using Bluebeam and best practices to have clean data within the software or your PDFs, and then we can leverage that outside it. So for us, we've got MCP. It's been brought into it. So we're using Claude at the moment. Hopefully in the future, we'll see Copilot come into this as well. So what that means for me is, and where this gets genuinely exciting, and I see this with other software too, beyond Bluebeam, we see a jump in the ability to use the technology. So in the past, going back to BIM spaces, when Dynamo came in, I was training people how to use Dynamo. It was not easy. Then other people going, well, I'm going to learn how to code, and I still can't code, and not many people can code. But now all of a sudden we've got this natural language we can start to use, and we can actually become pseudo coders as such without having using visual coding or even actual coding itself. I think that is going to be very interesting to have a small, go back to those SMBs, 10 people in the company. Skill set in software is okay, nothing great, but you know what? I don't mind using this AI chat GPT type scenario. All of a sudden, they're going to build master prompts to do amazing things for the quantity takeoff. I think that's going to be really, really interesting to watch and see what these people produce.
Yeah, I'm very excited also to see what happened in the space of AI and PDFs, right? Because one of the problems related to PDF is that they appear less intelligent than the 3D model, right, for the average user. But now with AI, you can probably read them in a different way, and you can read this data a bit differently. So it will be interesting to see what happens to companies like Bluebeam as well. Speaking of Bluebeam, so we're talking about the future in general. We have this very interesting, a great opportunity to have you here and learn more about what's happening actually in Bluebeam. So what can we expect? I know it's hard to predict like something like 5 years, but what can you share with us about what's happening in Bluebeam in the near future?
In the near future, I'll stick to that. I'll stick to within my swim lane on that one.
Yeah.
So we just released Max. So Max is where we've got the AI functionality. And for us, AI, as I mentioned, it's MCP. So within that version, there is an element of another tool called Firmus. I'll get into in a moment. So essentially, you get to bring your own AI of choice, because that's going to be a big issue for these big consulting companies around the world. Like as soon as you say AI, they go, well, hold on, InfoSec need to look at this. I think the opportunity for SMB or the little businesses, they're not going to worry about, where the AI is going to, as long as it can do the job easier. So we get to bring your own AI into the system and ask it questions and teach it and educate the system around how you want to use the PDFs or how the information you're extracting out of it and putting back into it more so, and the functions within Bluebeam. So that's going to be quite powerful. So we're not here to put a PDF into the cloud and it creates a prompt that says you should go away and do this. Where I see it going is you put a natural language prompt into MCP and it will actually do those things for you within Bluebeam. How much is going to evolve over time? At the moment, we're doing this much, but it's going to grow and grow. The other part I'm quite excited about is talking about Firmus, which is the software that we acquired late last year. So that is an inbuilt element we can look into at the moment, I guess, where it's AI and it's reviewing the drawings or possible issues. So where I think that could be exciting in the future is I remember myself issuing drawings, but they had to be coordinated with what we did with our specifications, what they had to be done with maybe even digital execution plans. To some extent will come into that, and definitely Australian standards or whatever standards you're abiding by. So what if you could have an AI that understands all this, collates it all together, and when you're issuing these drawings, all the specifications or anything else, you say, right, these are all working together and there's no inconsistencies within the information. I mean, risk is what we want to reduce. There's a lot of issues out there of just things being built wrong. So how can we reduce this? I think that's going to be quite powerful and hopefully just, saving a lot of stress out there for our community. So that's looking forward to that. And then just the general pieces that we do within Bluebeam. It's been quite exciting, I would say, the last couple of years at Bluebeam. There was a period where I've actually said this transparently to clients that it was getting a bit stagnant, and me who enjoys technology, not much was really happening. The development just didn't really feel there. And then with the new CEO, things just start happening. So every business quarter, there's a new version coming out. Whether it be the most amazing new tools depends on the client, but there's always something new happening, always something interesting. And for me, who enjoys technology, I want to stay on here because I want to see where we're going. I want to see what we're doing next. And sure, I do talk to product and see what's coming out and what they're working on and testing little versions and side projects. And it's great. It's exciting. So yeah, looking forward to see what Bluebeam keeps pushing out to the clients.
That's very exciting. And we are at the end of the episode, and we mentioned that you will launch a newsletter then. But if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Well, probably LinkedIn would be the easiest one. I'm not going to go beyond LinkedIn at this point. But yeah, reach out there. This month, you'll see a newsletter come out. I'll try and demystify what a CSM does. I'm always welcome to challenges or compliments, sure. But I just really want to, if you've got a CSM, how can you leverage them? I mean, the reality is you're paying for software, you're paying for a subscription service. There's the opportunity to politely exploit your CSM to get more productivity out of it.
Definitely. And Shanoc, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate it.